Maybe Chris and I should have a Kinks 1 second challenge later, man.
We could do that, yeah. I don't know if you know.
You ever done that, Chris? I'm going to get killed, I think, but...
What's the 1 second challenge?
We'll tell you all about it right now.
James, we've done... I'm more of a... Well, not more of a... I guess maybe I am more of a Beatles guy, but yeah, I love both groups, but... We've done it more with Beatles, where James plays like the beginning of a song, just 1 second, and the first you have to guess what the tune is just from the opening. You know?
All right.
How do you think?
All right, I'm up for it. I'm ready for it.
You think you'd fare pretty good?
I think I do pretty well with the Kinks songs.
I have a feeling
anyway.
you would.
I have a feeling I think you do.
We'll do it later. We'll do it later.
Right,
Let's get to know each other first. Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
I'm Johnny Payne. This is my good friend James Younger, and you are
Chris Kocher,
the author of Thank You for the Days. Well, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your book, Chris?
Well, the book is called Thank You for the Days, as you mentioned, and it is a collection of fan stories that was published earlier this year by Sonic Bond Publishing in the UK, and it was a great project to do because I've been a Kinks fan for almost 30 years now, and I had heard so many great, incredible stories over the years, and it was coming up on the 60th anniversary of the band, Since You Really Got Me, and, you know, all those songs kind of kicked everything off back in 64, and I thought, well, what can I do? I mean, I'm not a musician like you guys. I can't, nobody wants to hear me sing. Nobody wants to hear me play anything.
Oh, you never know.
So what can I do? Well, yeah, I'm not doing a karaoke challenge later, all right? Because you would lose all your listenership. But I thought, what can I do? And I have been a writer and an editor for a really long time. And for a long time, I worked at a daily newspaper here in Binghamton, New York, which is where I'm from. And I ran the editorial page, which was kind of a thankless job in a lot of ways, because people would call you up and go, boy, that opinion thing sucked hard. Like, I don't agree with any of that. But one of the things I did love doing is taking readers' submissions, you know, people who were not professional writers,
sure,
and putting them into shape, you know, making a good letter to the editor or like an op-ed piece and helping them out with that. So I thought, what if I did that with Kinks stories and kind of collected them, you know, smoothed them out a little bit, made them all, you know, stylistically consistent and, you know, and put them in a book. And I got in touch with Sonic Bond, and they said, we've never done a book like that before, but it sounds cool. Why don't you go ahead and try it? So they were very open to the idea, and we got more than 100 fans to tell their one best story in the book.
Yeah.
So I was trying to avoid doing like a laundry list of, here's the concert I went to, and then I went to this concert, and then I went to that concert. So I was like, tell me your one best story, because everybody's got to have one best story. Like, I'm sure each of you has one best Beatles story or one best story from another band that you really love.
Yeah, we got Kinks stories.
So, and you have Kinks stories too, but you know, but I'm just saying, like, everybody's got like that one story, that one concert. You know, it might be how you discovered the band. It might be how you met a friend that you still have, or you might have met a partner. There are a couple of marriages, at least in the book, you know, like just great stories like that were really kind of heartfelt stories that, you know, stood alone as really good stories, even if you had no idea who the Kinks are. They're just really good stories in general.
Do you have a favorite? Can you think of one that stands out, or do you have your own story in the book?
I mean, I did write one for the book that was, you know, about the last time that I was in the UK. Every year in November, they have an official Kinks fan club gathering. And they have a band that plays that is called the Cast Off Kinks. That used to be all of the other members of the band, apart from Ray and Dave Davis. And unfortunately, some of those guys have, you know, gone to the great gig in the sky now. But they still have some people who used to be in the Kinks, and they do a big fan club concert. The couple days before that, they have what they call the Kinks Fan Collective, which are just a bunch of fans from around the world who meet on the few nights before the official fan club meeting, and they do like random pub gigs like around London. And one of the gigs they do is at a place called the Clissold Arms,
of course,
which is literally right across the street from where Ray and Dave Davis grew up. Like, you can look out the window and you can see their home, in Muswell Hill, in the Forest Green section of Muswell Hill, where they grew up. And the people in this band, they're just great fans. They're musicians. They just know the songs. They don't really have time to rehearse. So they kind of do it on the fly, and it's kind of like a fun sing-along, just family reunion kind of event. And that's what I wrote about in the book. But there are a lot of great other stories in the book. There's a great story from Ron Sexsmith, who you might know.
Of course, yeah.
Who is a singer-songwriter from Canada.
Yep.
Who told about how he went to a gig in the early 80s and was apparently higher than balls and thought that Ray was singing directly to him during this concert. And that was the moment where he decided he not only wanted to be a musician, but he wanted to be a songwriter.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's a great story.
Ron is
from a guy like that.
Ron is, I would say, within that pantheon of songwriter, there's very few people who he's very well respected and revered by the traditional songsmiths. You know, Costello would be like in that world too. I bet Ray and him have probably done something together. Well, Ray's a bit curmudgeon-y, isn't he? He keeps his cards close to his chest, but
I believe they collaborated. Ray did an album of collaborations, maybe about, I want to say 15 years ago now. And I believe Ron did a song on that with him.
I can see
or Ron was on a tribute album. He was definitely on a tribute album.
Yeah.
Doing a song by himself. But I'm pretty sure he was on that collaborations album as well. But that's a great story. One of my other favorite stories in the book is about a guy who grew up in East Germany and heard the Kinks on like a pirate radio station and decided he was going to get to the West specifically so that he could go and see a Kinks concert and go to London and hang out outside Conch Studios, which is their studio out in North London, just hoping that he could meet the band. And eventually he did. Eventually he got out of East Germany and made it to London and got to meet them. And, it's just one of those where the guy's whole life changed because he loved some band from the UK and said,
yeah, it's incredible.
I'm going to change my whole life and fight the system and get out of East Germany in order to go and see them. So,
well, that's what I like about your book in general, and it's a lot of fun to read through. I've done the best I could of reading as much of it as I could. I've got a little baby daughter, so I couldn't blow through the whole thing in the time I had. But I just love the fact that, like you just said, that it's all about a band. You know what I mean? It's such a community idea that it's something that maybe possibly is quite rare nowadays, where it's just all these people that are connected simply by loving a band's music. You know what I mean? And I just think that that's such a cool and beautiful thing that's maybe getting a little bit lost in our fast moving world.
I was going to say that my friend Sam, really close friend, at one point, and not with any intention, and he's a big Kinks fan, ended up living next door to Conch Studios, like literally next door to Conch Studios.
Neat.
So there was a weird moment where we heard Ray, what we thought was Ray, playing acoustic songs in the garden behind Conch.
You were there?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't. Yeah.
We realized that it actually was that. He was just out there practicing for a Hyde Park show or something. Just practicing, kind of sharpening the saw. But you would see Ray around, and we've talked about this on the podcast a lot. If you are in Highgate or Hornsey, or the Clizzard Lost, Fortis Green and Muswell Hill, he's around. He's always walking about. He goes to church and he has a pint every now and then. So he's a presence still and has his own. He's not ubiquitous and enough that he needs to hide like a McCartney type. He still manages to maintain a level of normality in his life. Probably actually craves that kind of anonymity a little bit to some extent. So he's very visible, and there's been a couple of people since we've been sort of deep diving into the Kinks records over the last couple of months, which has been a real joy. We're both big fans, obviously, who've gone on their own psychogeographical tours, like you're talking about with the Closed Arms, to go find him. No one who's got in touch with me in the last couple of months has had any luck seeing him, but they've got close on the trail where they've been to the pub, not the Closed Arms, but I can't remember the pub that he drinks in. My friend Sam knows, and has asked. They've plucked up the courage to ask in the bar, and they must get people come in from time to time, and they're like, "Oh, we haven't seen him for a couple of weeks. He was last in it." They must sort of like get these fans like yourself who go in. So, have you ever met Ray?
I've met Ray a couple of times. He actually in 2010 played a gig here in Binghamton, New York. And I happened to know the promoter at the time and, managed to weasel my way backstage afterward and got to say a few words to him. And
that can be that can be quite stressful, can't it, when you meet your heroes, I find.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can get a lot of time, and that was fine. I mean, he had just done a 2-hour show, and he was
knackered.
Yeah, he was tired. I was trying to think, how old was he at that time? But
I saw him
he
on
was
that
in his
tour.
60s at the time, and
it was a great show.
He was still doing jumps and all kinds of stuff. And you would think a guy like that. I mean, I don't have the energy to do that, and I'm younger than that now. So I mean, I guess that's the rock star lifestyle. But yeah, I've met him a few times, and I used to be. Like I said, I used to work at the paper here in town, and I interviewed him a few times about various stuff when he was in the area, and it was cool. It was cool.
So you're in Binghamton, New York, huh?
Yep.
I have to apologize to you, Chris, because for some reason I just assumed you were English because of the way that you got in touch with us from this Kinks website, and that you'd written this book about Kinks fan stories. For some reason, the whole thing seemed like the most English thing I'd ever heard. So
that's the nicest thing you could say, Johnny. Thank you, thank you. I am. I feel like I'm an adopted Anglophile.
Right.
I'm like an adopted citizen.
But as a result, it caused some time zone issues about getting you on. So apologies for that. But I'm glad it worked out.
I appreciate your patience, and I really appreciate you having me on the show. Because I have been listening to your Kinks podcasts, and I've enjoyed them very much. I've enjoyed them a lot.
Thanks
some interesting thoughts that get me thinking about different songs, because obviously you guys as musicians think about them in ways that are different than I would think about them as a fan and somebody who just listens to the music. You have different views and different angles that you look at stuff from. So I really enjoyed that over the last few months.
Can I ask you? That's very, very generous of you to say. Can I ask you a question? It's slightly a sidetrack. What do you know about the guy who runs this website, Kind of Kinks? Because I love. Obviously, your book falls within this category too. Like, I find it so inspiring, like true fan art and true community building fan art, which is exactly what your book does. But also, this website is like, this guy has been updating this website for 20, 30 years, it seems like. Twice a week, he finds things, Kinksy-based things that are happening in the world. Do you know this guy?
Yeah, actually, he has a story in the book.
Okay.
Check out the book. There's a whole story in the book about how the website came to be and was put together. Dave Emlin is a great guy. He actually lives in Rochester, New York.
Okay.
So I've met him a few times.
Oh, wow. He's not English either?
No, he's not English either. No, he's in Rochester, New York. And he came down for that concert in Binghamton. And I've met him a few other times as well. He's a really great guy. He's a very quiet guy. So, it's great because, you have Dave Emlin, who runs the Kinks fan website. And then Neil Ottenstein is the guy who, for many, many years, ran a Kinks listserv, basically, where people would send in their posts and he would redistribute them and kind of edit them and whatever. And he's also a very, straightforward guy. He's not one of these like crazy hyper fan kind of, guys.
Sure.
Which I really appreciate. Neil is actually a rocket scientist and works for NASA and, or works with a contractor that works with NASA.
There you go.
Sometimes he'll be like, oh, we can't, I'm going to be busy for, the next week because I have a launch. And you're like, oh, It's like a product launch. And it's like, no, they're actually launching a satellite or something else up into space. But yeah, he's a genuine rocket scientist. So,
wow.
But they're both great guys. Yeah. Dave Emlin has been updating that website forever. And the thing that always makes me laugh is the page where all those links are is called the news and rumors page. And it says, you decide which is which. So if that doesn't tell you something about how, the whole Kinks ethos is in general, like, what do you believe? Like, do you believe the stories or do you believe the facts, or you figure out what it is, you put the links out there and let other people decide. And I always love that. That's always my favorite thing.
I'm enjoying right now the songs and chords section. It's amazing to me the level of that this guy has. It's chords to every single Kinks song, James. Yep. And you'll be happy to hear that Sweet Lady Genevieve looks pretty easy to play.
I mean, that one for me has been, for some reason, in going through the records, that one just, I think because I didn't know it. Or maybe if I knew it in a kind of, sort of a passive way, just from listening to the record and not really thinking too hard about it. And on that kind of post Lola 70s Kinks, the Preservation Act records, they sort of are, I ambiently knew them. I've never really critically listened to them. And that song really stood out to me. It's just a really nice song. He didn't write many love songs either. So,
is it a love song, Chris? Do you know what it's about?
You're talking about Ray, so you never know.
Yeah.
But it was around the time that he was having marital issues and, with his first wife. And the theory is that it basically was like this guy's plea to his ex-wife, his wife at the time, to kind of say, please forgive me. I'm, just a tramp in the Preservation albums. That's the character that he is portraying in that song, is the tramp character. But he's kind of pleading to his wife to say, please forgive me, please don't leave me. And spoiler, it did not ultimately work out. She did ultimately leave him, and but that's the theory about what that song is about in particular. The first
romantic though,
the first Preservation album I feel has some really great songs that you can listen to, like Sweet Lady Genevieve, that are like isolated songs that are just good isolated songs. When you get into like the second record that turned out to be a double album, the songs are more narrative. Like they're more like driving a particular narrative, and I think they suffer a little bit because of that. But other fans don't agree with me on that. But I feel like the first album is got a lot of great songs that you can just listen to independently, like that song in particular.
Yeah, Preservation Act 2, obviously it's driven by that kind of dystopian war theme kind of, and I suppose it's even for Ray, probably the closest he got to real ambitious political commentary. And I don't know how relevant you feel that commentary is today. For me, it obfuscates the record a little bit.
I just feel like sometimes the songs suffer a little bit because they're driving a particular narrative and
too conceptual.
They're too driving a plot to get forward rather than just saying, here's a great song that happens to fit in with what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Even Arthur, Arthur is an album of all songs like that, right? Like there is a narrative, but you could pick literally any one and it stands alone.
Well, actually, no, it's not. There isn't there's a narrative, but it isn't a linear narrative. Like with Preservation Act 2, it's actually a linear narrative in the sense that it's like moving forward in time, whereas Arthur kind of, it's more specific moments in someone's life that you can pull them apart a little bit more and move them around.
The first song is Arthur was born just a plain simple man. I always thought it was kind of like starts.
No, it is, but it doesn't have this. It's not like there's not like these like pieces of like government radio information about how this war is progressing through time, and you have to have the next thing. It's
right. I think Arthur was a little different because it was meant to be a TV play,
right,
with music. So they probably would rely on the narrative part to tell the story, and the songs were kind of there to accent different moments in the story. Whereas Preservation is the albums mainly, so you kind of had to rely on the songs to drive everything forward.
It is as close as he got to a rock opera, I suppose. Which was very de rigueur at the time. People,
and none of them are ever that good.
Are any rock operas good? Quadrophenia, is it good?
No. Tommy, I mean, people like it, but it's a bit much for me.
Ray does have his own West End show, though, doesn't he? There is a Sunny Afternoon. I don't know. Have you ever seen this? I don't really know much about it.
I actually saw it. They did the U.S. premiere of that musical in Chicago last month. And I did go to Chicago and I did see it. So because I never saw it when it was in London or around the UK, and I always regretted it. So I was like, all right, it's in Chicago. I'm going to drive out there and I'm going to see it.
What is it? What's it about?
It's a retelling of the origins of the band.
Oh, okay.
From sort of, when they were right before You Really Got Me, when they were kind of like teenagers discovering the music, and then You Really Got Me, and then the big wave of fame, and of course how they were banned in the United States for 4 or 5 years, and then coming back to the United States, and so it very much follows the narrative of sort of, if you ever saw any of Ray's storyteller shows from the 90s and early 2000s, he actually did an album that had all of that on there. But kind of following the early history of the band, and that's kind of what is retold in the musical as well.
How do you interpret the impact? Obviously, there's a standard interpretation of the impact of the 65 to 69 US ban on their like long-term trajectory, in that it turned them inwards and they became more insular and English. Do you think we can interpret it as being something, as fans, that actually was a blessing in disguise?
I think so, for a couple of reasons. One, it did allow them to turn, as you say, turn inward and focus on the Britishness of their music. I mean, and from a very practical point of view, I mean, the band was already kind of cracking up a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
On the way into the United States tour, the one tour that they did do. So if they had done a second tour, a third tour, I mean, who knows how long the band would have lasted.
Because he kind of lost his mind, didn't he, around then, too?
Yeah. I mean, it was the pressures of continuing to write hit songs and, kind of turning it into a factory sort of thing rather than an artistic sort of thing. I mean, of course, Ray had gone to art school, and when he started, he kind of saw it as more of an artistic kind of endeavor. And then when, of course, all the contracts were signed and there were a bunch of issues with management and the rights to the music and all that stuff, and all those pressures kind of came into it. I mean, the fact that they couldn't tour in America made them less famous during that period, but it probably saved the band in a weird kind of way, because they would have imploded or possibly exploded in a way that would have been very bad for everybody involved. And, Ray might have gone and been an artist or an actor, or Dave might have, ended up having a different course in his life, or it could have just been really bad. So in a way, it is kind of a blessing in disguise that we might not have had the band last for 30 years if they hadn't been banned in America. Of course, at the time, they're watching The Who and all these other British bands, the Rolling Stones, obviously, but even all of these sort of lesser bands, arguably,
fringe
go
bands
to America and make a fuck ton of money. And they're watching from the UK and they're going, that we could have had a slice of that fuck ton of money. And so I'm sure at the time it was very frustrating, but in hindsight as fans, and I think maybe even Ray kind of sees it that way as well, in some of the things he said, that he, at the time, it was very frustrating, but I think in hindsight it was probably a good thing, because the Kinks are always meant to be underdogs, really. I mean, whenever they kind of get to be too popular, they almost kind of undercut themselves in a way and end up doing something that will, like getting banned in America, or, they come back to America and then they decide they're going to do rock operas. They're never getting on the radio with a rock opera. So, that kind of thing.
It seems a lot like when they get success or things like that they make weird choices sometimes. Like, I remember one of my first introductions to the Kinks was because I thought they were really cool, and then there was a local video store where I grew up, and they had like a music section of VHS, like old movies, and one was called One for the Road by the Kinks.
Yeah.
And it's I guess like Van Halen had a big hit with You Really Got Me. And it was like right after that, they were like, we got to get on the road. And Ray's like wearing like a cutoff T-shirt and just being like a lead singer. And they're doing it more like Van Halen than like their version. And I remember being disgusted by this. Like, it was so bad. But it's almost like you're right. It's almost like when there's a little bit of bitterness or something fueling his songwriting, and they have to turn inward and do their own thing. These great albums are made, and then when they get a taste of something else, it's almost like, so maybe I never thought about it that way. Maybe it is a blessing.
I don't know. I mean, who knows? Yeah. I just sometimes think like, what if the Kinks were as big as like the Rolling Stones, or as big as, nobody can be as big as the Beatles, but like right under the Beatles. Like, I don't think that would have worked out well for Ray and his continuing mental health and just the way it all worked out. So
we also probably would have got less songs from him. I mean, the Stones haven't written a song for 45 years, really. I mean,
right.
I mean, and even the late 70s stuff is dubious, I think. I know Johnny
they did
really
so much big touring. Yeah, you're right. Like, it was just these the tours were what mattered in the 70s, kind of. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, I guess we'll do another album, like, but
I've got a question for you here.
I've got a lot of questions.
Okay, well, you go first, Johnny, because I've already asked a couple.
Okay, well, okay. This is like, it's really nice to have you. And I've had a few questions about the Kinks that I've wanted to ask someone who knows a lot about the Kinks for a long time.
I'll do my best, guys. You're putting me on the spot, but I'll do my best for you. Hit me.
The first is, what is the deal with Kinks to the Bone? The album in the 90s where they like re-recorded a bunch of their hits, kind of.
Yeah. That was actually their last album.
Okay.
And it's funny that you asked this question, because I was actually listening to an interview with Ray not that long ago. And he said that right before this album, they were actually signed to Columbia Records. and they had a deal there. And somebody at Columbia said, hey, we're really interested in that back catalog that you have. Like, it's great that you want to make new music, but
Yeah.
That makes sense.
we really like all
Right.
those hits from, not only the 60s, but
Yeah.
also, the arena rock years from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Boy, wouldn't it be great if we got a chance to release all that stuff? And, the Kinks and Columbia Records parted ways after basically one album and one EP. And, but Ray said, that's actually a good idea. Let's try to re-record some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And, so the To the Bone album is, I think it's really an interesting album because it's kind of half in concert recordings. So you have like the big, arena rock kind of stuff, like You Really Got Me and whatever.
Yeah.
But they also did a session at Conch Studio, and there's actually a story about this in the book. Not to plug the book again, but
No,
there's a
continue.
great story in there.
Do
from,
plug the book. Plug the book.
One of the guys who runs the official Kinks fan club, his name is Bill Orton, and Bill Orton wrote a great story in the book. I actually asked him to write this story about the session they did for the To the Bone album, and they invited something like 20 or 25 Kinks fans into Conch Studio, and they had it set up as if it was the front room in their childhood home, and they had recreated like the fireplace and all this other stuff.
Oh, wow.
And they essentially did like acoustic unplugged versions of a whole bunch of their hits and other songs and whatever. And that's the other half of To the Bone.
Okay.
Is all of the stuff that they recorded with fans in Conch Studio. And it's funny because you hear some of the songs played, you can tell which ones they are, and you can tell like there's like a smattering of applause, and you're like, then you realize there's only like 20 other people in there who are listening to all this. But man, like those 20, 25 people are like the luckiest fans on earth. I mean, I'm not gonna lie.
Is that documented like visually?
They filmed it as well, and the film allegedly is out there, and they were going to release it. Bill is still very much in contact with especially Ray, but other members of the Kinks, and they were going to release the film and whatever a few years ago, in the last 10 years or so, and they kind of pulled back on that. But the film does exist. They used some of it, a few short clips in like a documentary like 10 or 15 years ago. And there's a couple of songs online in a very poor quality video. But yeah, it does that whole film does allegedly exist. They filmed it, they recorded it. There were versions of the songs that did not make the album that they recorded. So yeah, so it's out there.
Is there also footage of them during the Muswell Hillbillies era playing all of those songs in kind of a studio environment? Because I'm having kind of a Mandela effect.
Yeah, you've
thing
had this
swear.
is a flashback that you've been having consistently.
I
actually heard you talk about this. I heard you talk about this, and I actually was looking online to see if I could find it. I remember that episode.
Yeah,
that's possible. I mean, it's possible that you might have seen something like that.
Yeah.
When they put out a box set of the Everybody's in Showbiz album 5-6 years ago, there was a DVD on it that was about 15-20 minutes long that were home films that they had taken during that era.
Amazing.
And because originally the idea was to do Everybody's in Showbiz as an album, but also do like a film as well. Because Ray, having gone to art school, really was interested in film and ended up later, directing a couple of films, and in the 80s mainly. But the idea was to make it a film as well. And the record company said, we're not paying for that. I mean, because they were already putting it out as a double album that was half studio and half live. But that's why a lot of the songs on the Everybody's in Showbiz album deal with life on the road. There's songs like Motorway talking about how shitty the food on the road is. And there's songs like, like Here Comes Yet Another Day, where it's like you're on tour and you don't know what city you're in, and
sitting in my hotel.
Basically, Sitting in My Hotel, those kind of songs. And that's why that was kind of a lot of the theme on that album was, again, they were going to make it into a film, and those were going to be moments in the film
So
that
maybe
just
there's
never
some footage.
got made.
Yeah, maybe the
Chances
footage
are
is out
there
there.
footage out there. Yeah,
I love all these kind of curiosities.
Some,
yeah. I mean, I actually, in a similar sense, you probably have both seen it or may have. Like, I had seen it before. I watched Amazing Grace, the Aretha Franklin documentary last night.
Okay,
and I didn't have any idea about the story behind that. That's a fascinating story about footage that had been left dormant for 40 years, and like Sidney Pollack documented her playing in a Baptist church in L.A. and it was all filmed, but I guess he hadn't used clapboards, so they couldn't sync the audio up to the video.
Oh, okay.
And it took this one guy at the course of like 40 years to like get people involved to figure this all out. And then Aretha Franklin didn't want it to come out in the end because I suppose she felt like she'd missed her. This was meant to be her big moment in the 70s of becoming a TV star. And anyway, I watched it last night. Absolutely breathtaking documentary, which is certainly worth watching. And funny cameo from Jagger and one of the other guys, Charlie Watts, are both there just somehow, But anyway, that I love this kind of. There's a lot of it with the Kinks. There seems to be a lot of very grandiose ideas that never fully come into fruition with like things like this, like these big album concepts, or the fact that they built their own front room in their studio and played to 25 people, and we don't know about this and haven't seen a video of this. It's like it's a pure artistic endeavor that showcases, I suppose, their like dreamlike kind of. He's a visual guy, like you said. He does a lot. He was into film and stuff, and it's surprising to me that there isn't an official or a what's the word? A definitive movie about the Kinks, like a documentary, like a really truly definitive one. They certainly deserve one, but maybe that also fits into their underdog category, and aesthetic.
And there were a couple of, if you can find them online, and if you can't, let me know, and I might have a copy somewhere.
There you go.
There were a couple of documentaries that were actually made by Julian Temple.
Okay.
I want to say 10, 15 years ago, he did one on Ray and one on Dave. And I think they were for BBC TV. Cool. That might actually be the documentaries where this footage from To the Bone ended up being put into, I think.
I've seen one recently where there's like a man who plays a young Ray in it talking to the camera on a green somewhere. I don't know if that's one of them, and they're all in it, and they do some acoustic footage, but it didn't feel like. It felt like they were in a pub. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I did see one recently that was almost good. I would say it was an almost.
It was almost good.
Yeah.
There's James's review. It's almost good.
It was almost good.
It was right there.
Those Julian Temple ones for sure.
Yeah, the Julian Temple ones are definitely worth seeking out. And if you can't find them online, let me know, because I'm sure I have them somewhere. Kingdom Come was, I think, the one about Dave, and I think the one about Ray was called something like The View from My Window, or it was something with window. World from My window.
Well, the Dave one's definitely on.
Does this one have Dave walking around the countryside a lot? Rambling.
I think they both have them rambling around the.
I've seen one where he's rambling.
North London, or yeah.
He lives out on the coast now, I think, near Bristol or something.
Wait, is it called Imaginary Man, the Ray one?
Yes, actually, that might be the one.
Yeah, I think
might be the one.
Whoa. I just opened it. They're both online. I'm gonna watch them.
There you go. Yeah, I would recommend them. I mean, Julian Temple obviously has, the pedigree to put it together, and he actually made some of their music videos in the 80s with them. Like the Come Dancing video was a Julian Temple video, and of course he got Ray to be in Absolute Beginners with Bowie. Ray was in there for like 5 minutes or something.
Is Julian Temple the Sex Pistols guy? Is kind of like punk guy a bit? Like, did he do punk videography.
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he did some of that too. Yeah, yeah. He's like he did a lot of music films and music videos for MTV and things like that.
Do you have a favorite Kinks album?
Do I have a favorite Kinks album? I mean, it depends on the mood. Honestly, I mean, you can't go wrong with Village Green. You that's kind of the basic answer. You can't go wrong with Muscle Hillbillies. You think of like, what are the albums where I wouldn't skip any songs?
Right.
That's what I think is like
no skip
top tier
Kinks
album.
records.
Yeah.
So you
Those
think
two are
that's
definitely,
well? I think Arthur would be a no skips.
And Arthur's a good one.
Sometimes if you're trying to hang out with people and have a good time, you might not want to listen to Some Other Son.
No.
You might skip it. That's all.
Or like Yes or No Sir. That's not really a party record.
No, it's
like,
not.
Yeah.
Has your what about this? Like, has your relationship to any one album dramatically changed over the years? Something that maybe wasn't important at one point now is more important, or vice versa? Is there something that sticks out as a curiosity to you?
That's a great question. I'll answer it this way. I have actually been listening back. I don't know if you guys know the Phobia album, which was the last studio album.
Yeah, I've not got that far yet.
But when you get that far, it's interesting how a lot of the songs on there are about sort of the pressures of modern life and how screwed up the world is. And they made it in 1993, and things were pretty screwed up then, but it kind of resonates even a little bit more now with the way the world is now.
Okay.
That album I've been listening to a little bit more than I did in the past.
Does it sound
in the last
good?
few months?
Yeah, the
Again,
production.
I'm not a musician, so
right.
I mean, it sounds good to Chris. Now, is it going to sound good to James?
No, I
and
just
Johnny?
mean like
I don't know.
I don't mean no. I don't think about it in terms of being a musician. It's just like sometimes these heritage bands, they make some strange decisions with that's a really dodgy time for music and music production, and like some people do it well, but a lot of bands kind of embrace the technology, and it's actually the lack thereof that made them sound good in the first place. I can think of like Steve Miller records from the 90s or something where it's just like it sounds psychotic.
There's only about like less than 10 acts that were around in the 60s that made good records in the 90s. I would say most sonically are like not great, but like Leonard Cohen was good. Dylan's got a couple. Paul Simon maybe.
Aerosmith.
Stones, like no good. Aerosmith, actually, yeah, but they weren't around in the 60s though.
No.
They did. They did actually.
Yeah. I'm thinking they kind of stand out somehow to me in this strange thing,
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question for you. Are you an archivist? Are you like a Kinks archivist? Do you collect things, memorabilia, etc., etc.?
Not so much. I do have, some special things that I've acquired over the years.
Well, what is the most meaningful item in that collection that you have? What is your most? It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be a curiosity. It can just be a record. But what's the thing that is your most meaningful Kinksy thing that you have?
Probably, I would say, in the late 90s, the first time I ever was like within 3 feet of Ray, I had him sign a copy of his unauthorized autobiography that's called X-Ray.
X-Ray.
And I have that on a shelf up here. So that's nice. Probably the most meaningful thing, because it was the first time that I really went from, being in the audience to actually being near him. I saw him behind, the theater after the show, and he signed it for me, and that was a cool moment. So that's probably the most meaningful thing that I own. That's a Kinks related thing.
Do you have a lot of records? Are you a vinyl guy?
I am not a vinyl guy. I'm
Right.
sorry if that disappoints you, but
Not at all.
Not at
CDs.
I don't have the room. I have all the CDs.
CDs. Yeah. Well, some say that's the best quality achievable.
And I do have some of the more recent vinyl releases.
Box sets and things.
Box sets and stuff like that.
Oh, you got
but
a
mainly
box
that's
set?
for a lot of like the extra stuff that's in there, like it's got a cool book or that kind of thing. So or the DVD that I talked about with the Everybody's in Showbiz box set that was cool, but I'm not a vinyl guy. I don't have room.
Yeah. Is there anything that you know of coming down the pipeline that we should be excited about Kinks wise? Like, have you heard any rumors? I mean, I guess I could just go to kind of kinks.net for this kind of stuff, but you're so.
I haven't heard any good rumors. The biggest thing that's happening is you talked about the Sunday Afternoon musical that is going back on tour in the UK in the fall and in the spring. That's kind of the biggest Kinksy related thing.
I gotta see it. I gotta see this thing. I'm gonna go to West End and find it I'm going once it comes back on.
What's the Queen one they did? That was huge.
Isn't it called We Will Rock You? Is that it?
We Will Rock You.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing as that, except maybe not quite as successful.
I think it'll be a lot more fey and kind of twee and kind of paisley pastoral than that, I imagine.
It actually was very loud in Chicago. Like, they were not
Second
shy.
City.
In fact, they were handing out earplugs on the way in to anybody who thought they needed them. Apparently, they had gotten some noise complaints, and their solution was not to turn it down. The solution was to give people earplugs and let them deal with it, which I respect.
Was there a
lot.
live band playing the tunes?
Yeah, the
in the pit.
The actors played the songs.
Oh,
so
I'm into this.
The guy, the guys who played Ray and Dave and Mick
job.
Avery and Pete Quaife. They all played the instruments, and they had some help with, other people who were there, other members of the ensemble occasionally picked up an instrument, or they had, a guy who would play keyboard for some songs who kind of sat in the back and, added that part of the texture of the music. But it was all done. So it was a legit rock band.
That might be like a kind
together.
of a pivot, Johnny, for us.
Yeah.
It
was a legit rock band.
We might be a bit old now to play them like in the 60s,
De-aging. We could borrow some of Scorsese's
makeup
de-aging.
Does a lot. Makeup can do a lot.
It really can.
Or maybe you could convince Ray to do like an 80s Kinks musical, and you could be those guys.
I'd be down. I'd be down.
Their time as arena rock gods and that kind of thing.
I got some cut-off t-shirts. Yeah.
Very fertile territory for some stories, I imagine. I'm just saying.
I appreciate that. I think it's fine. Okay, here's a question for you, since you're a very Kinksy guy. Where does it start? What was you talked about this guy in East Germany smuggling himself over Checkpoint Charlie to have a cup of tea in Fortis Green. What was the first moment it clicked for you when you realized this band is different?
Well, I would say I had a friend in high school who really loved the Kinks, and he would talk about them all the time, but he never played the records for me. And, I wish he had, but I ended up remembering that he would talk about them all the time. And I discovered them, 5-6 years later, kind of on my own. And I suppose it was just the lyrics. I mean, I've always kind of been an Anglophile in general. So, I mean, it was the lyrics, and it was, the fact that they were British, and also the fact that I really love discovering something and realizing there's all this stuff that you can dive into and get lost in, really.
It's a world,
When you discover something like the Kinks and you realize there's 30 years of Kinks music plus, 30 years of Ray and Dave separate music, and you can discover the documentaries and you can discover the musical and all this other stuff. I mean, just being able to dive into that stuff it's very daunting. Like, for instance, I find David Bowie's catalog very daunting, because it's a similar kind of time period, and there's all these different eras and all these different sounds. And
True.
I find it kind of, I'm trying to get more into it now, but so to kind of dive into that, and I mean, who knows, like why does it hit that one spot in your brain that says this is the band for me?
Yeah.
I mean, can you really explain that?
That's the beauty.
It's a mystical kind
of
of thing.
It's the magic of music. What's your take on the song "Art Lover"? I was listening to it the other day and having a conversation with a musician friend of mine about like. Well, I don't want to put you on the spot about it because I guess was it even a controversial kind of song? Like,
I mean, I don't think it got a lot of radio play.
Yeah.
I assume if it had, sort of like Lola has sort of like that transvestite, transgender, cross-dressing, whatever vibe you want to put on it.
Yeah.
But, Art Lover wasn't really on the radio. But, I mean, it's one of those songs that, in my opinion, is sort of your classic Ray Davis song where he makes you think it's about one thing, and then like at the end there's the twist, and you're like, okay, this guy's not like
where he says
guy.
it's what's been taken from me, right?
Yeah,
so the idea is that he's lost his daughter. Yeah,
right. He's in the park, and he basically is a father who's lost his daughters, and I mean it's a situation that Ray could relate to because, as we talked about, he divorced his wife. He had 2 daughters with her. He probably didn't see them as much as he had in the past. And, it was a situation he could relate to. And
it's a brilliant song to me in that way, but I could totally understand how a lot of people, particularly nowadays, it would rub them the wrong way. But I think for that reason, because of that twist at the end, it's like so classic Ray, and a song that very few people could write and get away with,
Like, I think if you only listen to the first 2/3 of the song, you could be like, man,
one of the worst songs
that's
ever
one
written.
creepy guy, Sort of like right up there with like Aqualung, like sitting on the park bench and watching all the kids, But then, if you get to the last verse, then you realize, well, I mean, maybe he's still creepy. I mean, he's still sitting in the park watching kids, but at least there's a reason behind why he's doing it.
True.
I mean, it's not just because he's, eyeing up the little girls. It's that he misses his own daughters, and this is the only way that he can kind of fulfill that desire to see his daughters is by seeing the girls in the park. But
yeah.
See, and
that's
how he did it, and that's why it's clever. You see, it's a very fine line.
Yeah.
There you go.
I often draw comparisons to Ray Davies and Randy Newman. I don't know if you've ever thought as terms of,
I've thought about that,
satirical songwriters that can talk about, put themselves into a character and write about controversial topics and sort of get away with it because they're so eloquent at doing it.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of parallels there that, Randy Newman could be like your American Ray Davis, or Ray could be the British Randy Newman, whichever way you want to do it. But
is
there's
it
a lot
pronounced
there.
Davis? Do you know this? So we've been saying it wrong all these years. Yeah,
that I don't know, but yes. If you hear interviews with him, that is how he said it. Yeah,
Ray Davis.
Ray Davis. Yeah, that I guess that's the Welsh, way of, his family is Irish, and that's how they would say it. So
interesting.
Yeah.
You learn something new every day.
I don't think you'd mind either way.
I think he's learned to deal with it. I'm sure. Yeah.
Do you think there's an album? And this is hard to say, I suppose, as we're a band that is constantly undervalued, but do you think there's an album that fans of the band misread or undervalue?
Yeah, I think a lot of the late 80s stuff, and maybe it's because that was some of the first Kinks music that I heard.
Yeah.
But I think, like I really love, but I really like, the UK Jive album. There's some good, I think there are some good songs on there. Some people think it's like the bottom of the list in terms of their career and their songwriting and all that stuff. But I think there are some good songs on there. Is every song a great song? No, but every Kinks album has at least a couple of great songs on it. So you just have to kind of, some of it is, as you were talking about, the production of it. Like you kind of have to overlook the 80s kind of production of it that can kind of turn you off and sound sort of metallic or tinny or weird to, your ears now because you're used to all that digital enhancement and all that stuff. So
I'm looking at a record here that just came up. Kinks Lost and Found, 1986 to 89.
Yeah.
UK
Yeah, that
Jive.
was sort of the greatest hits of their time with MCA Records, which was only 2 studio albums and 1 live album. So after they left MCA said, "Oh, let's do a compilation and cash in."
I mean,
that kind of is the best of.
We'll look. There's a song in here called "Welcome to Sleazy Town."
Yeah,
I like the sound of that one.
Yeah.
That's great.
Nice. Hey, James, let's give this lad a 1-second challenge. I want to hear what he can do here.
All right. I'm ready. I'm prepped. I'm ready.
We won't do it. We won't do a buzzer in here.
No.
We'll just let him do a few, and then I'll try a couple. But
all right. Okay. All right. You're not going to lose. You never know.
Okay.
Have more faith in yourself, Johnny.
Well, if it's just 60s, I think I'd fare okay. But
all right. Okay. Who's going first?
All right, here we go. All right.
Chris can go first.
Okay. Here we go.
All right. Hit me.
Nice and smooth.
All right. Well, that's David Watts.
Nice.
Wow.
Well, because that's how it. I don't know why there's that studio
Impressive,
stuff
though.
at the beginning, but yeah.
Oh boy, I'm scared. Okay, James.
All right.
Fuck, I don't know. What is it, Chris?
All right. That's Dead End Street.
Yep.
Oh shit.
Hell yeah, dude.
Dead End Street with that bass line from Pete Quaife. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
All right. You're gonna cut it off before the music, but I do know this one.
He knows
I know
it?
this one. Yep. That is one that is called Holiday in Waikiki.
Yeah, I was trying to think if it was Holiday in Waikiki or the other one that's on Preservation about a similar thing.
And a fun fact about the Face to Face album where that is on is they originally wanted sound effects between all the songs, like the ocean or whatever.
Yeah.
And the record company said, "We're not doing that." And then like a year later or whatever was Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So yeah. So they had the idea and they didn't have the record company support for that.
How about the idea? How about is it not the most Kinks thing you've ever heard of that they put out Village Green the same day as the White Album?
Absolutely.
It's just like,
Absolutely.
oh man.
Yeah.
All right, James, I got to get one, man. Come on.
All right.
Oh yeah, it's get back in line.
There you go.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well done. Well, I think
I'm willing to say that this guy is on my level with Beatles with Kinks.
Yeah.
This is impressive. So give him a hard one, James.
All right, give me the hard ones.
Something from something we haven't even talked about. See what he can do
here. All right.
All right.
I got it.
All right, you stumped me.
Last
You got
trip
that one?
to Sleazy Town.
No, that was not that.
No.
No, it was really mean. That was Animals in the Zoo from Percy.
Oh, that's
Okay,
a good song.
there you go.
Yeah.
That
was
is a
pretty
good song,
deep.
but
It was pretty deep.
that's a great song. But could I recognize it in 3 seconds? No.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are many Kinks fans listening to this podcast right now, screaming at their radio or smart device or whatever, saying, "How did you not get that, dumbass?" And the answer is because
Well, there's a lot of Kinks material. See, Beatles is kind of easy because they were only around in the 60s. But the Kinks, we're talking, like you said, 30 years of tunes.
So where can people buy your book? Where can people get hold of your book? What's the way to get that in your hands or on your screen?
You can get the book anywhere where you buy your books.
Right.
As they used to say in the commercial, anywhere where good books are sold.
Yeah.
You can go to Amazon, you can have it special ordered. It's in the whatever the big book catalog.
It's there.
Database, whatever. You can have it ordered at your independent bookstore. I fully endorse going to your independent bookstore and asking them about it.
Yes, sir.
If you want to support them. But you can get it pretty much anywhere.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Chris. Chris Kocher is our guest, and your Kinks knowledge is much appreciated and impressive, to say the least. And let's hope that there's some big Kinks thing coming down the pipeline soon, and then maybe you could come back on and talk about it with us. An official documentary, maybe a little Dave and Ray reunion show of some kind, who knows?
You never know. I mean, weirder things have happened, but anyway, thank you guys for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
A real pleasure.
And like I said, I have been enjoying your reviews of the albums very much, and
thanks, man.
You have some very interesting ideas about some of the songs and from the musician's point of view. So I really like that.
Appreciate you, pal. Very nice to get to meet you.
All right. Likewise.
Take care of yourself. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.